So recently we hired a marketing agency, but it seems to us that everything is taking a lot of time and it costs us a lot of money. Guys, welcome to my podcast, Whiskey on the Rocks. This is Martin Kura speaking. So I wanted to mention that I actually understand the situation from both sides because, I also worked for a client and worked with a marketing agency on behalf of the client, as well as had a marketing agency myself. I actually managed a marketing agency. So I understand both sides of the story. So from the client's perspective, it's pretty obvious. You are hiring a marketing agency because you're hoping in performance. And the bigger the agency, the bigger the performance you're expecting on, right? But sometimes, things get stuck on day-to-day agenda. There could be some bottlenecks resulting in lack of performance, or everything just takes a lot of time and talking because the agency has some standard procedures that they're following and you're still ticking off checklists and you're feeling like you're not getting to the point of why you actually hired the agency yet. From the agency side, it could be frustrating as well, especially when the client is impatient, because sometimes the agency has, like I said, a standardized procedure, like an onboarding checklist that sometimes take quite a long time, especially when there is a lot of things to be hand over. Login details and setting up analytics and setting up campaigns or different kinds of analysis, etc., etc. So especially the beginning could be frustrating, the first couple of months. And also after, because sometimes the collaboration doesn't go down well as both parties originally hoped. Sometimes it's because the client isn't quite ready on hiring a bigger agency. They might have been hoping that the agency would solve all their problems and they would just simply delegate all the things to them. But it's not the case because they still need some input from the client and the cycle goes on and on again. And sometimes there are also expected issues like running out of budgets, or the agency might lack some personnel, especially senior workers or senior specialists. And the client could push the agency to put some work on the most senior guys they have on some important projects or strategic projects, and it also leads to a frustration. So from my perspective and from my experience, there is one thing that needs to be done, and that is proper supervision of the agency. Now, supervision doesn't mean that someone is pushing the agency. To be absolutely clear, supervision should be beneficial for both parties, including the agency, because it also, among other things, improves communication between the client and the agency. So either there is someone already on the client side who can do the supervision. It should be a qualified person with some marketing experience. Or it could be an independent specialist as well, or someone working as an interim marketing manager or a temporary CMO or someone like that. So let's get to the point what the actual supervision should or could entail. So first of all, the supervisor should have a clear picture of the KPIs, as well as the agency should have that too. So all the parties should agree on specific KPIs. And this is also quite a common misconception when people are putting together the KPIs, because oftentimes the KPIs don't make any sense at all, or they are overblown or very ambitious. So the KPIs should be put together mutually. More people from all of these different parties should collaborate on this and should put together a list of KPIs that is reasonable and realistic. I've actually seen a lot of versions of KPIs. I've seen like linear KPIs, for example, KPIs concerning website traffic, and there were increments of traffic being added up every month, like the linear progression of traffic, which is unrealistic. So all the parties should be aware that all the marketing activities are building up gradually, right? So in the first months, there's usually a lot of things to be worked on, to be set up and to be reviewed, like, as I mentioned, the analytics, campaigns, content strategies, the brand story, really, that should define the strategy. So there's usually quite a lot of work to be done without any palpable results in the first months, right? But it's still very important work. Based on that, the marketing activities should commence, and there is a sort of like a testing period when you evaluate the impact of individual activities. And more or less, oftentimes, a lot of activities are scrapped and thrown away, and you're starting from zero, or you're inclining more towards other approaches. So it's kind of like a testing period, and then finally there is a set of activities that finally starts bringing some results. So it resembles more or less like a exponential growth curve rather than like a linear progression, which is definitely unrealistic. Another thing done by the supervisor should be translating business goals into marketing goals, which actually is something that is related to the previous point. So what could be business goals? Like, we want to sell 10,000 t-shirts in 2024 or something like that. And the marketing guy or the supervisor, together with the agency, just comes up to the CEO and tries to figure out ways to make it happen. And they agree on certain strategies, and they define the marketing KPIs and goals out of these strategies, like how much traffic should we have in 6 months? How much brand awareness should we have? How many impressions should we have? At which point, etc., etc. What will we be focusing on in the first months, and what comes next? Like, do we build a brand first, or do we focus on high performance channels like search campaigns, for example, or newsletters? The supervisor should also be in charge of handing over important documents and insights from the company onto the agency, because this is typically a very common bottleneck. Sometimes, the client is very annoyed by the agency wanting them to provide some information or insights. But it's crucial, because marketing as such, especially at the beginning, cannot be put in silos or cannot be performed independently on the company. It should be deeply rooted into the company. And the way that all important stories that are connected with the brand, including new products or new clients or some other stories, they should be communicated on the outside, right? So it's very crucial to have this connection between the company itself and the agency. So it's a very crucial role. The supervisor should also be performing their own analytics, meaning preparing their own reports and running their own numbers, KPIs, soft KPIs, like looking at the development of individual channels and how they influence one another, looking into assisted conversions, In other words, running their reports independently of the agency so that they can compare whatever findings they might have with the findings of the agency. So that's very effective, in fact, because the findings should be more or less the same. There could be like different approaches, slightly different findings, but the essential findings, like what's really going on at this moment, needs to reflect the reality. Also, they should be commenting on the reports from the agency, and they should actually analyze the reports from the agency, and they should be giving them feedback. It's not about like confronting the agency necessarily, but when the agency consists of people who are keen on improving and working on themselves, they should be happy for any constructive feedback from the client side, and vice versa, obviously. The supervisor should also be initiating the next steps based on the reports, because a report is a report only when it has the next steps defined, or a to-do list, because otherwise it's just artwork or some sort. But to be effective, it should consist of tangible steps to resolve the issues and to improve the current state. So the supervisor should be in charge of making the next steps happen. Of course, the agency could take the lead and initiate the steps themselves, but the supervisor should be the one who makes sure it actually happens. And the supervisor should also be in charge of the overall marketing strategy, right? What I mean by that is when, for example, at the beginning you decide together that in the first 6 months you will be focusing on utilizing the low-hanging fruit channels, like tuning up campaigns or editing keywords, or in other words, making changes with very immediate impact. And when this is done, you will move on the next part, which is brand building and performing activities with long-term ROI. So as a supervisor, you should be the one who is actually deciding on when this will happen. For example, we've done all the first changes that we want to make, and now it's the time to focus on long-term brand building or whatever. So this should be the job of the supervisor. What, on the other hand, should not the supervisor do? I would say the supervisor should not be resolving communication issues, or worse, correcting conflicts between the client and the agency. Because simply put, it should be a marketer, like a marketing guy, and not a mediator or a lawyer or someone like that. So before hiring such a guy for the supervisor role, make sure there aren't any prevailing conflicts between you and the agency, because otherwise you would just add another step in between you and the agency in the middle, and it's probably not gonna work, because the marketing guy who will be performing the supervisor role probably will be just frustrated. So all of the parties should be able to sit down to a table and talk like normal guys before actually hiring another guy to supervise the agency's work. The supervisor should not be working as an assistant either, right? So he or she is not a go-to person when you want a marketing task to be done. They will just go to the agency and delegate the task onto them. Because the agency should have a to-do list right from the beginning, which actually results from a long-term strategy. And they should be working on that to-do list right from the beginning, 80% of their time or more. There indeed could be some ad hoc tasks that need to be done. For example, you decide to attend a roadshow or a workshop, or you're invited to a conference as a speaker, or you created a new distribution channel, or whatever else needs some ad hoc work in terms of graphics or in terms of writing copy or anything like that. But these tasks could be anticipated also and could be taken account in advance. And there should be a clear process of how you will handle these ad hoc tasks and by whom, right? Who will handle these tasks and through which system. So it's not that you should just dump some task on the supervisor and they will further dump the task on the agency. It doesn't work like that. So everything should be planned in advance as much as possible. And as I already mentioned, the supervisor guy should not be the one who is like constantly pushing the agency, because whenever the agency is not performing, the reasons should be resolved. Whether they're not getting the inputs they would need, or they are lacking personnel, or they are lacking anything else like strategy or resources or whatever. So the supervisor guy should be the one like dealing with these issues, or at least helping the agency to deal with the issues. Even, when the agency is lacking personnel, for example, they are lacking designers. So the supervisor guy could just go and use their own resources to find a designer. So it's kind of like a win-win type of collaboration. And I think it's kind of like how it should work, and it's a friendly way to do business. So again, the supervisor could be some guy who has background in marketing, or at least some marketing experience, is keen on learning a lot of things in marketing. Or it could be like an external help, like an interim marketing manager or interim CMO, who will take care of all the processes, strategies, and also make sure to hire some personnel or marketing staff to be able to delegate the work on when they leave, the company, if this is an interim period, for example. So I hope that you found some inspiration in my podcast. If we are not connected yet via LinkedIn, let's connect on LinkedIn, and make sure to follow other podcast episodes of Whiskey on the Rocks. Thank you guys, and have a good one.